Ruben Swartz, your host and chief nerd. Welcome to Sales for Nerds, the podcast for people who love using their expertise to serve clients but maybe aren't quite so enthusiastic about the sales and marketing aspects of the business. I struggled with this for years, ironically, as a sales and marketing consultant to the Fortune 500. Over time, I realized that there was a more effective, more authentic way to get clients by helping instead of selling, teaching instead of marketing, and connecting instead of networking. My mission is to help you learn the easy way instead of the way I learned it, by sharing my stories, by bringing on awesome guests to share their stories. And of course, as a software guy, I had to go and create the CRM I wished I'd had when I was struggling with more traditional systems. It does more of what us solo consultants need, help us nail our positioning, help us get more leads and conversations off our website, get more referrals, have more conversations, automates proposals all the way through to e-signature and more, and less of the bloat that comes with traditional CRMs. If you want to check it out, you can start a free trial at mimiran.com. That's MIMIRAN.com. And you can even just sign up for the free version, which helps you nail your positioning. And you can also find proposal templates, lead magnet ideas, and more. Once again, that's MIMIRAN.com. Now let's get to it. Today, I'm super excited to have with me Bob Burg. If you have not heard of Bob Burg, and I don't know how you wouldn't have, but it's possible, he is the co-author, along with John David Mann, of The Go-Giver, and also the follow-up books, Go-Giver Sell More, The Go-Giver Leader, The Go-Giver Influencer. He's also the host of the Go-Giver podcast, and so much more. He's a trainer, he's a speaker, he's a former Golden Gloves boxing champion, which I'm really excited to ask about. Bob, welcome to Sales for Nerds. And I believe you do not have any wine in your glass, right?
No, I usually have a cup of coffee on me, but I'm actually a little bit coffeeed out today. So I've just got my my water.
Okay, well, in the spirit of the show, I've got some.
You go ahead, drink up, l'chaim. You just go for it. There
we go. We've got some Chateau Chemin Royal from Bordeaux here. It is one of those Costco specials. I think it's about $15. 2016. It's fantastic. It's got that Bordeaux flavor, mostly Merlot, a little bit of Cab, but it's not crazy earthy like some folks find the French wines a little overpowering. So if you're interested in something that sounds really snooty and fancy but isn't and is tasty, there'll be a link to that in the show notes. Bob, first of all, thanks so much for practicing what you preach. I had posted a quote of yours on my LinkedIn profile, one of those like, hey, look at this wise quote from someone wiser than me. And you stopped in and said, thanks for quoting me, which I thought was so nice.
Well, I appreciated it.
And that sort of led down this path of, I've been hearing for years about the Go-Giver. And, you know, it just, I don't know, it just seemed like whatever, yet another business book, blah, 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 business parable. Oh my gosh, like, you know, it's just too much. And so, but as we engage with each other on LinkedIn, and so many people have recommended this book to me over the years, and I was like, well, what's my excuse? Let's have Bob on Sales for Nerds. That'll make me read the book. And I did. It takes about an hour, just like everyone told me it would, which is, I think, great. Most business books are way too long. And this is actually, you call it a business parable, which I thought was very interesting. Tell me a little bit about why you decided to tell or impart your wisdom via parable as opposed to a book or a story or whatever people usually do.
Yeah. Well, in all of my books before the Go-Giver series, in which I teamed up with John David Mann, who's a great writer and storyteller, he's really the lead writer. And but I'm a how-to author. Step 1, step 2, step 3. John knows how to weave a real story. My first kind of big book was called Endless Referrals: Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales. The first incarnation of that one came out in the mid 90s. It's now in its third a revised edition. And it was really just, a standard how-to book. It was for entrepreneurs and salespeople who knew they had a great product or service. They knew it brought fantastic value to others, but they didn't feel comfortable with the process of going out into their communities and creating relationships that would lead to people feeling comfortable with them. I feel like, as I like to say, knowing, liking, and trusting them,
right?
Wanting to do business with them, wanting to refer business to others. So that was why I wrote Endless Referrals. It was a system. It was a process. But I'd always, since I'd been in sales, enjoyed reading parables, business parables, which are, again, short stories based on truths, and of course filled with principles of truth, but fictional stories. As you know, stories tend to connect on more of a heart-to-heart level with people. And I'd always found that when I'd read parables, eh, it was enjoyable. I felt I could learn the material even faster and apply it even easier. So I thought, what if we could take the basic premise of endless referrals, which is all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust, and put that into parable form. In coming up with the title, that was easy. I said, well, what is the main characteristic? What's the essence of a person who's able to develop and cultivate quickly and sustainably those know, like, and trust relationships? And it's that they're always giving. Their focus is on giving value to others. So coming up with the go-giver was kind of natural. But again, the best thing I did for that book was asking John David Mann, who at the time I knew as he was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I was writing for. And at the time, not many people knew him. Now, I mean, he's the editor or the co-author of choice, ghost author, writer of choice for when an agent or a publisher has a politician or a big business person or an athlete that they need to write the story. John's the person they call. Back then, few people knew of John's brilliance. Fortunately, I was one of them.
Right.
And so I had asked John to be the lead writer and co-author. Unfortunately, he said yes. And that's really how the Go-Giver came about and why we did it as a parable.
And I think it's great. One of my mantras is a proposal is a story, not a brochure. A website is a story, not a brochure. I'm always trying to get people to tell their personal bios as a story instead of a resume.
Right.
And yet business books tend to be instruction manuals or textbooks even. And there's a lot of great business books on the shelf behind me. Mm-hmm. But the Go-Giver, as much as I know that you're sort of emotionally manipulating me, I remember it much more clearly, not just because I read it more recently, but because it's in story form and there are characters, there are human beings, not just recipes or lists of instructions. So kudos to you on that.
Though I would probably take respectful opposition, I would guess, to the word manipulating, because I think of manipulating as something you do in order to get an outcome that may not necessarily help the other person.
Fair enough.
Hopefully it's persuasive.
Yes.
In its story and in its lesson and its messages, but the idea of it is to bring value to the reader.
Right. But I think
semantics, of course, but
very important semantics. Very good point. So let's we don't have a ton of time, but I want to talk for a second about this Golden Gloves boxing champion stuff. Like, how did you get into that?
Well, although my dad after World War II was actually manager of the famous Fifth Street Fight Gym, Angelo and Chris Dundee's back in the day. And Angelo Dundee later would become the trainer for Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, and so forth. My dad actually didn't want me to box, but it was always sort of in my blood. It was something always that I was exposed to growing up. And it just happened to be that I think when I was about 16 and a half or so, a girlfriend of mine at school, her father happened to be one of the trainers at the local gym. And it was the idea. I also had a lot of aggression I needed to take out as a kid. And that was a good way to do it and build some confidence and to be able to constructively. And it just kind of, grew from there.
Awesome. So, now, how did you go from there into sales?
Well, I mean, I think I was 19 and a half when I stopped boxing as an amateur. I had taken a couple of years off after high school and worked, and then went to college. And after college, I got a job as a broadcaster, first on radio in sports, and then in television on doing news for a very, very small ABC network affiliate in the Midwest. I really wasn't very good at that. Okay. And it wasn't long before I knew, this isn't what I'm going to be doing. And so I like to say I graduated into sales. The problem was I knew nothing about sales on a formal level. So in the training where I was working, it was negligible. at best, right? Meaning non-existent. And so I really floundered for the first few months. Fortunately, I was in a bookstore one day and saw a couple of books on selling. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but 40 years ago, those were just not as prevalent. It's not something you really came across. So I was inspired just by the fact it was they were books on sales. Like, what? There's a way to do this that
Right.
and so I got the books. I studied and I learned, and I was, I'd come home after work and just into the wee hours of the morning, I'd be reading and studying and highlighting and note taking and dog earing and practicing and and within a few weeks my sales really began to do well. What that said to me was this: if you have a methodology, there is almost a double negative here, almost nothing that you can't do. Okay, within reason, of course. I could never have been heavyweight champion of the world because I just didn't have that kind of talent. But no matter how hard I worked and how much I knew, but within reason, we can pretty much do anything if we have a system. I define a system as simply the process. Excuse me, the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles, the key being predictability, right? If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired result of B, then all you need to do is A and continue to do A, and eventually you'll get the desired results of B. So, but and as I was studying sales more and more, I started also realizing that a big part of success in selling is personal development. So I got the books that, you probably have on your shelf and everyone watching and listening has on theirs: the How to Win Friends and Influence People by Carnegie, and Think and Grow Rich by Hill, and Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, and The Magic of Thinking Big, and, all the classics of the sales and personal development genre. And it was really something I enjoyed a lot. And, as I continued to learn lessons and began to form some of my own, I guess, methodologies off of what I had learned from others, things began to take shape.
So you got better at sales. You started to like it.
Oh, I loved it. Absolutely. Yeah. I didn't at first, but as I got to know more about it, and as I realized that, that really what it's about is bringing immense value to your customers. And
Well, I think it ties in some ways back to what you called me out on earlier, right? If we are out there manipulating people so we can make quota, it's kind of a miserable experience. If
right.
we're out there
Right.
helping
it's a
people,
difficult existence too. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's no fun and it's hard because people can smell that and they don't
Right.
want to deal with that. But if you're out there adding value and being helpful to people, it's much more fun and you're going to be much more effective.
Ruben, there's a lot of people who will say, well, I don't like sales. I don't like selling. And I really believe that when they say that, it's not that they don't like selling. It's that they don't like what they think selling is supposed to be.
Exactly. That's me.
Right. If you believe that selling is about trying to convince someone to, buy something they don't need, right, or manipulating someone to buy something they don't, well, it's horrible. It's a horrible way to live life. I think most people, being basically good people, we want to feel we're doing good for the world, not evil. Selling is simply this: it's discovering what the other person does need, want, desire, and helping them to get it. That's all it is. The old English root of the word sell was selan, which literally meant to give. So when you're selling, you're literally giving. Now, someone could say, well, wait a second, isn't that semantics, right? When you're selling, what are you giving? Well, I would ask this: you have a prospective customer or client in front of you. You're doing your presentation. You're selling. What exactly are you giving? I suggest you're giving time, attention, counsel, education, empathy, and most of all, extraordinary value.
I think that's right. And I could not get over the mental blocks I had around the term selling. So I just decided to start calling it helping. And then I was okay. I was like, I can do that naturally.
Exactly.
But that was my own mental clutter.
No, and that's okay. So there's people who will say, don't sell, help. Don't sell, serve. Don't. And I say this, I'd say, well, that's fine. I understand what you're doing, but I'd say, understand that by serving, you are selling.
Right.
By helping, you are selling, or by helping, you are, by selling, you are serving, by selling, you are helping. So it's not, don't sell something good. Let's see selling as something good that you're doing because you're able to serve, because you're able to help, because you're able to place that person's interests first.
I think that's a great point. I think especially these days when computers have basically replaced the salesperson showing up with a product catalog and an order taker, your job really is to do the things to sort of analyze and synthesize and create solutions that the person couldn't do on their own.
Yeah. Salespeople are needed today more than ever. They're just not needed to be information dispensers. That used to be a big part of selling. You were the information medium.
And that's you dispensed the information and you took the order, right?
Right. And yeah. And if it was for a bigger ticket type of sales, you had to know how to dispense the information, find out what that person, and do the whole thing. Now, the big thing is, you still have to, of course, understand and be able to educate to that degree, but really it's something different. You're educating them more about how your product or service fits their needs, makes their lives better, does for them what the information itself can't really communicate to them.
Right. And I think it's much more interesting to be a salesperson today because you're not just impersonating a catalog and a cash register. You're actually more like a doctor.
Great point.
So let's talk a little bit about the book. And I don't want to give too much away just in case somebody hasn't read it.
It's okay.
But let's start with, I think it's not to give anything away here. There's a trade secret that the main character encounters early in the book that he's dumbfounded at how silly it is.
Right.
But it really opens everything up. So can we talk about the trade secret, or is that too secret?
Yeah. Oh, no, not at all. And of course, the trade secret is giving. But what do we mean by that? And this is the key. This is really the key that Joe needed to understand. See, the premise, and we often say the premise of the Go-Giver is that shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others. Understanding that doing so is not only a more pleasant way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. But, Ruben, it's not for some way out there type of woo-woo, magical, mystical, just do good things and good things will come. No, not at all. Not at all. That's magical thinking. No, it's not that at all. It's actually very rational. Think about it. When you're that person who can take your focus off yourself and instead place it on that other person, looking out for their best interest, helping them get what they want, helping them solve certain challenges, helping make their life better. When you do that, people feel good about you. People want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be a part of your life, a part of your business. They want to tell others about you. So it just makes sense to focus on them. When I speak at sales conferences, I'll often say, nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. Right? They're not going to buy from you because you need the money or even because you're a really nice person. They're going to buy from you only because they believe they'll be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And that's the only reason why anyone should buy from you or from me or from anyone else. But that's good news because it means that that salesperson who really can shift their focus and make it all about that other person, hey, they're 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game. This is why John David Mann and I say that money is simply an echo of value. Right? It's the thunder, if you will, to value's lightning, which means nothing more than that the focus must be on the value you are providing or giving another human being. The money you receive is simply a natural result of the value you've provided.
That's a great point. And I think I came at that from a slightly more mathematical angle, I guess, when I was a pricing consultant. And so many companies would say, hey, let's look at our costs and figure out how we should price things. And I would always say, well, let's look at the value because that's what's really the limit on how much money you make. And it's more interesting. So can we talk a little bit about the 5 laws? Are we giving away too much of the story, or can we jump into the 5 laws?
No, not at all.
And guys, we'll probably run through the whole book here because it's not long and it's not complicated. And I fought this for years. Don't be like me. After you get off this podcast, go read the book. It'll be worth it. I promise. So this guy, Joe, he's a go-getter, right? He's sort of your typical person hustling hard. And I remember those days. I was like, gosh, I got to go sell some stuff. Got to call a bunch of people. Got to make quota, that kind of thing. What does he learn when he starts meeting these interesting characters?
Yeah. Well, see, and here's the thing, being a go-getter, if you want to say a go-getter is a person of action, that's fine. Be a go-getter and be a go-giver. they don't, there's no dichotomy. When you're a go-giver, a person of action, and a go-giver, someone who's focused on the other person. Perfect. Just what we would say is don't be a go-taker. That's the person who feels almost entitled, if you will, to take, before having added value to the other person, to the process, to the situation. Again, their focus is on themselves instead of the other person. And again, no one's buying for us. They're buying for themselves. So Joe, who again was a go-getter, but he was also a go-taker. He kind of, his focus wasn't in the right place. It was on himself, on his quota, on who owes him what, and so forth. And he met a series of people, of mentors, including a main mentor by the name of Pindar. And he learned five principles that would shift his focus and help bring him what we call stratospheric success in the book. The 5 principles are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. The first one, the law of value, is all about making the customer experience so exquisite that the other person feels they've received more in overall value than what they've paid, while you make a very healthy profit. So let me explain that very quickly and use an example. Price is a dollar figure. Value is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. Okay, in other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, that brings so much worth to another human being that they will willingly exchange their money for it and be glad they did, while you make a healthy profit? Quick example: someone is an accountant, and so they're selling accounting services. Okay, and let's say it's your accountant, and he charges you. You hired him to do your taxes. He charges you $1,000. That's his fee, literally his price. But what value does he give you in exchange? Well, through his hard work, dedication, getting to know you, learning about your business, focusing on you, he's able to save you $5,000 in taxes. He also saves you countless hours of time. He also provides you and your family with the security and the peace of mind of knowing it was done correctly. So we see that he gave you well over $5,000 in value in exchange for $1,000 fee or price. He gave you more in value than he took in payment. So you feel great about it, but he also made a very healthy profit because it was worth it to him to lease out his time, his experience, his expertise for $1,000. In a free market-based exchange, when I say free market, I simply mean no one's forced to do business with anyone else. In this type of exchange, there are always 2 profits: the buyer profits and the seller profits, because each of them come away better off afterwards than they were beforehand.
Right.
That's the law of value.
You actually have a great passage about this in the book, where one of the characters says a bad restaurant tries to give just enough food and service to justify the money it takes. A good restaurant strives to give the most quantity and quality for the money it takes, but a great restaurant strives to defy imagination to provide a higher quality of food and service than any amount of money could possibly pay for. Right. And I think, you might have described the good accountant gives you $5,000 and some peace of mind. The great accountant saves you $100,000 or introduces you to the next business partner or something, right? Something that you couldn't even put a price on. And we can't do that in every single transaction, but I think it's a great aspiration. So that's value, right? Then we have sort of the flip side of that, the law of compensation.
Yeah, I'd say it's added to that. And that is that the law of compensation says your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So where law number 1 says to give more in value than you take in payment, law number 2 tells us the more people whose lives you touch with the exceptional value you provide, the more money with which you'll be rewarded. So your accountant in the last example did a great job of giving you immense value. Chances are you feel great about him. You do business with him again. You'd probably refer him to others. His other clients feel the same way. So our accountant is very quickly amassing what we call an army of personal walking ambassadors. And as he continues to touch the lives of more and more people, his income will continue to grow and grow.
That's a great point. There's a difference between like you did an acceptable job and you turned your customer or client into a walking ambassador.
Yeah, exactly. Law number 3 is the law of influence. And this says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Now, please let me qualify that statement because it can easily be misconstrued, right? When we say place the other person's interests first, we don't mean you should be anyone's doormat or a martyr or self-sacrificial in any way. Absolutely not at all. It's simply understanding that the golden rule of business, of sales, and Joe learned this from several of mentors, and you and I discussed this earlier, is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And there's no faster, more powerful, or more effective way to elicit those feelings toward you in others than by genuinely moving from an I focus or me focus to an other focus.
And I would even, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. That's okay.
I would say the other thing I would add to that is it's also more fun that way.
Mm-hmm. Much more rewarding. Yeah.
You get to just enjoy yourself a little bit more. I think there's something sort of beyond, well beyond sales and internet and corporations and all that, going back before people, social creatures like the ones that share their food, like the one that helped them pull the ticks out of their fur, whatever it is, right? Like we're wired to notice that people are taking care of other people and not just themselves.
Yeah. One thing about the laws in this story is that they are all congruent with human nature. You know, so when we really get down, and I just, very few people have really noticed before what you noticed about that, and that is very true. These are all just things that they seem counterintuitive because we see so much about sales is this and sales is that and business is this and not really. It's actually human nature. It's
So the last 2 laws are a little different. They're a little bit more introspective, and in some ways, I think more counterintuitive. Let's go into those.
Yeah. So the law of authenticity says that the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. In this part of the story, the mentor for this section, Deborah Davenport, she shared a very important lesson she learned in her sales career, and that is that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and they are all very, very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true, authentic core. But when you do, when you show up as yourself, day after day, week after week, month after month, people feel good about you, right? People feel comfortable with you. They feel safe with you. Why wouldn't they? They know who they're getting, right? And again, they know you, they like you, they love you, they trust you, they want to be a part of your life. They're much more willing to introduce you to others. And so it just makes sense to be authentic, come as yourself. The problem with that, though, is that, when we cannot embrace our strengths, okay, it's difficult to show up authentically. And that's why it's so important. And whether you just do this through introspection or you have a formal coach or an informal coach or mentor or whatever, you've got to be able to identify and embrace your strengths because that's what you've got to lead with. Now, it's important we know our weaknesses too, and understanding the 3 types of weaknesses, the ones that can be ignored, okay, because they really don't make a difference, the ones that need to be mitigated, and the ones that need to actually be changed into strengths if you're going to be effective. But we lead with our strengths. It's what I call our market value. And I define market value as that combination of strengths, traits, talents, and characteristics that allows a person to add value to the marketplace in such a way that they will be rewarded for it. And we all have these. Some of us have one big strength, but most of us don't. Most of us have various strengths that by themselves are good, not spectacular, but they're good. But when stacked on top, in fact, the author of the Dilbert comic strip, Scott Adams, who wrote a great book, How I Failed at Practically at Almost Everything and Still Succeeded. I think that's the name of it, but I may have a word or two wrong. He calls it the talent stack. And I thought, it was a brilliant book. I thought this part was just absolutely so bang on. He was saying there are very few Michael Jordans in the world, right, who have just such an amazing gift or strength in certain way. Most of us don't. Most of us have a few things that we have some natural time, but that we can develop. But
Right.
when we take those 3 or 4 talents and stack them on top of each other, it makes it so that we can bring some immense value.
So a lot of people are going to say, that's great. I get that in theory. The big problem I have is that my weakness is sales and I can't mitigate it. How do I lead with authenticity? How do I find strength in these kind of situations?
Well, I would say your weakness probably isn't sales. You might think, well, my weakness is I'm not a big talker. Because a lot of people falsely think that the better a talker you are, the better a natural salesperson you are. And that's, of course, just diametrically opposite to the truth.
Right.
Most people who just love to talk, extroverts, maybe, who just love to talk and they love to talk, they might be good talkers and they might be a lot of fun at a cocktail party. They tend to not be good salespeople. The best salespeople are great listeners. The greatest salespeople have either a natural and or highly developed interest in the other person. Okay. So it's first understanding it. You may think of sales in a certain way and think it's not you, so you're not good at it. Well, but let's reframe that. Let's look at what we were talking about earlier in terms of what sales is and what are the characteristics of a good salesperson. Are they able to ask questions and then listen? Are they able to think and add insights in order to be able to, bring a better outcome to the prospective customer or client? So that's why I would say go back to the beginning, check your premises, and say, no, I'm not it's not that sales is a weakness. It's that maybe I don't quite understand what selling is.
Right.
And maybe I have some great.
So let's go to the last law, which I think was the irony is for a lot of us. One. We're great at asking
certainly
these questions.
The most difficult one for most people to really embrace, and that's the law of receptivity.
But then, at least for me,
it's just as important as all the other laws. And the law of receptivity says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. And this really means nothing more, Ruben, than understanding that yes, you breathe out,
just be ourselves,
but you also
be authentic.
Breathe in. Reframe. You breathe out carbon dioxide. You breathe in oxygen. You breathe out, which is giving. You breathe in, which is receiving. Giving and receiving, despite the horrible messages about money, about abundance, about lack that we receive from the world around us on a constant and continual basis, basically, from the time we're born to the, through schooling and our peers and news media and everything. I mean, the messages are just horrendous and they're wrong. Okay. About, you think if you listen to people, you think anybody who's made a lot of money did it on the backs of others, or they did it by taking advantage of others, or by being, it's a big world. There's certainly people who've done that, but by and large, especially to the degree you're working within a free marketplace where no one has to buy from you, think about it. The only way you can make a lot of money is to provide exceptional value to the lives of a lot of people. So people who make a lot of money, and assuming as most of them have, they did it honestly and genuinely, they should be applauded, not looked at as a drag of society. My goodness, it's awful. But anyway, so understanding that, okay, it's realizing that giving and receiving are simply two sides of the very same coin.
Notice you did not say giving and taking. You said giving and receiving.
Receiving, right. two sides of the very same coin, and they work in tandem, right? So, what we know though, because it's just nature, it's the laws of nature, we need to focus on the giving of value before we receive. And remember in the story, Pindar talks to Joe and says, there are people that go up to a fireplace as though to say, first give me some fire and some heat, then I'll throw on some logs and some newspaper and light a match, right? Doesn't work that way. It's like going up to a bank teller and saying, hey, I'm thinking of opening up an account with you, but first give me an interest payment.
Right.
No, it doesn't work that way. We must make the deposit before so we focus on the giving, and then we allow the receiving. And we've got to understand that when we start, denying that receiving, there's probably a reason for it that goes beyond logic. It's most likely within our unconscious because of all the horribly negative messages we receive, from the world in that regard.
So what's an example of not receiving properly or shutting down when we should be receiving?
A lot of times it can be sabotaging a sale, doing that thing that you shouldn't do, but because you just don't feel right about receiving. And so unconsciously you're saying or doing something that is going to mess up that sale.
Would that also include not charging the proper amount of money because you don't think you're worth it?
That could absolutely be. Well, that comes to understanding your value and allowing and being able to receive in like measure. One of the biggest things that people do is they lower their price much too quickly, or they try to compete on low price, which is a race to the bottom. When you sell on low price, when you sell on price, you're looked at as a commodity. When you sell on high value, you're looked at as a resource. But to sell on high value, you've got to first understand the value of your product, of your service. You've got to understand your own value, and you've got to allow yourself to be able to receive that. So you make a great point. I'll just tell you that I truly, truly believe that prosperity is something that needs to be actively studied. And there are people like Randy Gage. Randy Gage's Prosperity blog and his Prosperity TV channel on YouTube. There are people like David Nagel, people like Ellen Rogan, people like Bob Proctor, Sharon Lecter. There's a number of people.
We'll put links to all those folks in the show notes.
Sure. Another guy, there's a guy named Ken Honda from Japan who wrote a book called Happy Money. And it was about the energy around money. And of course, it's not the money that has the energy, it's the energy that we as human beings give them. But all of these speakers and writers and teachers of prosperity, what they have in common is they rarely talk about how to make money. They talk about the mindset, because it's all about the mindset. The how-tos are the easy part. It's getting past our own unconscious belief systems that have been just drilled into us. For a quick example, and Randy Gage points this out, in the first Spider-Man movie, okay, Uncle Ben and Peter are on the couch talking about the family being poor. And Uncle Ben says, well, Peter, we may be poor, but at least we're honest. What a horrible, horrible statement for a young kid watching this movie to hear. What's the premise? That if you're poor, you're honest. If you're honest, you're probably poor. And if you're wealthy, you're probably not honest. And the best way to get wealthy is to not be honest. These are horrible. By the way, this is just not one thing. Notice this in every movie you watch, just about, okay? And in so much teaching that we get. It's amazing about this message. So what I want people to do is start questioning their premises. When you hear someone say that millionaires or billionaires should not exist, just ask yourself why. Why? Why is that true? Why did that person say that? And how did they learn that? From where? What's their experience? Where did they learn it from? And what was that, right? And start questioning your premises and asking yourself questions, thinking things through. That's how important I believe this is.
Well, we could probably have a whole other conversation about the political and societal aspects of this that's sort of beyond the scope of this podcast.
Oh, and that wasn't even politics, by the way, even though that might be one certain side that tends to downtrod the written. By the way, if you notice those people who are talking bad about how horrible the rich are, these are typically very rich people. So, but I really wasn't going to politics. I was just saying that is what we hear. I mean, that is what what you hear from people.
Well, again, I'm like, gosh,
I wish
we could spend like I could have a whole other bottle of wine on that topic. But let's keep this tactical. Let's keep this sales for nerds. What should people go do after they listen to this? I thought that was one of the other interesting aspects of the way you told the story in the book, is that the character is given these lessons on the condition that he applies them immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So what can people go do after they get done listening to this that will help them start to put into action? They can be a go-getter about being a go-giver.
Sure. What can they do? And again, I'm going to just want to go back to 1 second, because I got the feeling that you thought I was being political. I'm neither Democrat nor Republican.
And neither am I.
Right. These are principles of economics and of human nature that I'm talking about. Okay. So I don't care which side of the aisle said this or that. I'm just talking about basic principles. As far as what people can do, start applying them. Just like Joe in the book. Because remember, the one condition that Pindar put on mentorship was, it's not enough to just ask yourself the question, will these work? It's applying them. And you don't have to apply them particularly well. With Joe, one of them was serving coffee to a whole lot of people, right, in order to just apply the thing about reach, about serving a lot of people. So we serve coffee to a lot of people. That's it, And so, yeah, don't put your pressure on yourself. But I want people to build. I want people to take action. As you said, I love this. Be a go-getter about being a go-giver. So take action and then build on your small successes.
So what would you tell people to do? And I know it's hard because you don't know what state anyone's in. It's a podcast. They could be listening to this 3 years from now. Mm-hmm. But if you could just tell them to go do one thing that will set them on the right path, and I'm going to say start by reading the book. So I already took that one from you. But what should they do next to put this into practice?
Again, just ask yourself, how can I add value to other human beings? I mean, it's as simple as that. And that's whether you're in person or whether you're online. It doesn't matter. Is what I'm about to say or do or tweet or post or whatever, is this more likely to add value to another human being?
And I think that's a great point. And we run into people all the time, right, that we can add value to. Absolutely. And there's also a bunch of people that we know that we're connected to, that I know from personal experience we might feel shy about reaching out to. But if we have the opportunity to add value to them, I would encourage people to go do that, pick up the phone, pick up the Zoom, whatever it is, and go help those folks that you know you can add value to, but maybe you're just feeling a little shy about. Now, where can people go to learn more about you other than the bookstore?
Best place is my website, which is Burg, BURG.com, and they can read the first chapter or an excerpt of any of the books. And I also have a blog and a podcast and all that fun stuff. And if they scroll down to, I think, the bottom of Burg.com, there's all the different places on social media to connect with me if they choose to.
And you've got a free mini course on selling the Go Giver Way. Check that out. And Bob, thanks so much for everything that you do, keeping the world spinning around and encouraging everyone to be more giving, and then hopefully also encouraging people to be open to receiving and keeping the wheel turning. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's mine, Ruben. Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening. Did something in this episode or a past episode help you out? I'd love to hear about it. Send comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes to hello@salesfornerds.io. And of course, iTunes reviews are super helpful for getting the word out. So if you've got a few moments to put one of those up, I'd really appreciate it.
If you got a friend who'd benefit from one of these episodes, send a link. If you got a friend who wouldn't benefit from one of the episodes, but you just haven't talked to in a while, this is a great excuse to pick up the phone and give them a call. Of course, if you're looking for a whole new take on CRM for solo consultants, along with proposal templates, lead magnet ideas, free positioning tools, and more, check it out at mimiran.com. That's MIMIRAN.com. Again, thanks for listening, and until next time.